Hello, this is Eric Engheim. Today I'll be reading one of my medium stories called No, Norway Was Not a Poor Country Before Oil Was Discovered. Ask any Norwegian about Norway before oil was discovered in 1969, and they will tell you that Norway was a poor country before oil was discovered. It's not strange that they say this because it's a myth we get taught in school. I'm not sure what the motivation for this story was because it isn't true. It is true that Norway was poor compared to what it is today. The problem is that it gives the impression that Norway was poor in relative terms, which is absolutely wrong. Norway was not among the poorest countries in Europe historically. It was among the richest. Now, why did I bother writing about this? One reason is because in these times, social democracy is being heavily debated internationally due to political leaders such as Bernie Sanders in the US and Jeremy Corbyn in the UK. Many on the left like to point to the Nordic model of social democracy. In these discussions, I've noticed there is a propensity to dismiss Norwegian development with the argument that Norway would be a poor backwater if not for the discovery of oil. Let's examine the claim with some historical data. This map shows GDP per capita in Europe before the outbreak of World War II. Notice something funny? The supposedly backwater of Europe is marked off as the richest country in Europe, even ahead of Switzerland. How about looking at Norway right before the oil incomes started coming in? So oil was discovered in 1969 and production started in 1971. So 1970 should be a good year to look at. So what you can see here is the dark green indicates higher GDP and dark brown indicates lower GDP. Again, we can see Norway marked off as one of the richest countries. This pattern is consistent going further back in the 1800s as well, judging by the data presented on Wikipedia on historical GDP numbers. So the question then is, how did Norway get so rich so early? So in my article on Medium, I mentioned Ulla Honningdal Gritten, who gives an account of Norwegian economic history. So from this we have that Norwegian economy grew strongly in the 1843 to 1875, not long after Norway gained autonomy in the 1814 and entered a political union with Sweden. Gritten mentions fish exports, timber, and maritime services as key industries. At one point, Norway had the world's largest merchant fleet. In 1875, 7% of the world's merchant fleet was Norwegian. The 1840s was also when Norway started industrializing. In 1905, Norway was able to start utilizing its vast hydroelectric power, resulting in the founding of the largest Norwegian company for a long time, Norsk Hydro, producing fertilizer using electricity. This was kind of a new process at the time that favored countries with access to cheap power. Of course, simply having natural resources is not enough to get rich. Otherwise, Africa would have been the richest region of the world and Japan would be dirt poor. Institutions and human development is also of major significance. An unusual feature of Nordic countries is that historically, while they were among the poor regions of Europe, they had unusually high literacy levels. In medieval times, Iceland, for instance, may have been the most literate country in Europe. As I've written about before, geography is very important. In particular, access to efficient transportation by water is almost more important than natural resources for development. The Netherlands, being low and flat, benefited economically from the ease of which canals could be dug. It's because the countries below or close to the water table, which means digging canals is easier. Britain has advantage both in ease of building canals as well as being a narrow island giving more coastline relative to landmass. Norway is slightly different. The country is not suited for canal building with all the mountains and hard bedrock. However, Norway has an extremely jagged coastline full of fjords, giving it Europe's longest coastline. With lots of forest, this gives a good starting point to be a maritime nation. Many places have lots of forests. Russia, for instance, has more forests than Norway. However, this forest is not easily accessible by water. The combination of a huge coastline and lots of rivers allowed Norwegian timber to easily be moved to ships on the coast for transport to the rest of Europe, giving export incomes. And for those interested, if you look at my article, you can see that there is, but this is mainly for the Norwegian audience, I guess. There's a Norwegian comedian called Harald Eia who actually addresses this myth about Norway being poor in a series called Sånn er Norge. So even in Norway, on Norwegian TV, this is something being discussed, that we have all been fed this kind of myth about being so poor, which is not really true. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you're more interested, take a look at my article and read it. Thank you.